Good afternoon, welcome to the work session, November 21st. First off, we got a presentation of the Dawson County Employee Handbook. County Attorney.
Good afternoon. I've never stood at the podium, but I thought I would so you didn't
You're
have to strain
privileged.
your necks down that way. Well, I don't have a fancy PowerPoint. I talked to Dave about that, but we decided that would be time and money and opted for me to just present this to you with my notes, which I think I can do easily and save you a little extra expense. So what we've been in the process of doing with this county employee handbook is really doing a complete overhaul. It hasn't been touched since it was adopted back in 2015 for the most part. There's been amendments in some respects throughout those years. Lisa Green, who was your HR director, took the project under her wing and brought you the first product and made a presentation at a previous work session, and then it was given to us for legal review, and so I've taken it from there. I was very impressed, I just want to tell you, with the process, because a lot of counties don't engage all of the various department directors, and I think those are your stakeholders who deal with employee issues day in and day out. So they know what they're confronted with, and I think it's really great to have their input. And I think it was a good process that brought the product to you the first time. Since Lisa's presentation, I've been reviewing it for legal updates because things do change and federal employment laws are governed under federal and state regulations that are important that we make sure that we're always up to date. Since that time, of course, Brad Gould has come on as your new HR director, and I've met with him as well as the county manager to discuss any additional input that Brad has, and has gotten some good comments from him that we've addressed as well. So with that, you know it's a very lengthy document. 100 plus pages. So I'm not going to endeavor to review it all with you. You've had it now for about a week and a half, and you certainly may need more time with it. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of what I believe to be the most significant changes that might guide you as you start to go back and look through it. In many respects, if you line up the old book and the new book, you'll see a lot of the same things and just some organizational differences. But there are some important additions that I want to note to you. The first thing that you will note is the organizational structure. The old book was relegated into a section called rules and then a section called regulations. And while they did not consult with me before they started this process, I think the organizational structure they undertook was a good one because they separated it then into sections or chapters that have clear headings, as you'll notice if you just flip to the table of contents. I know when I refer to this book, and as I've been working in it, if I want to find something, I can pretty easily look at the headers and the page numbers and find the section I need to be in. The other book was much harder to do that. So the goal here is that an employee can pick it up and say, okay, I've got an issue with Family Medical Leave Act. I need to know when I can take my FMLA. I flip over here, and here's a big section that says leave, and then I go down to where it says FMLA, and there's the page, and I flip right to it. And so that's the goal. And it may not be coincidental that this looks very much like a few other policies that I've actually authored in other jurisdictions around. So it's an organizational structure that I know that works. But it wasn't my doing, but I do think it's good. I like it a lot, and as I said, it mimics what I've done in some other jurisdictions. The second thing I want to point out is you will notice throughout that we have references to applicability. And so the employee handbook certainly applies to all of the employees who are under your chain of command, underneath you and the county manager. As to other elected officials or appointed officials, we do not have the ability to require that they comply with these employee handbook policies. We would love them to do that. We would love them to join in and adopt these policies, and I think once you've approved it and gotten the book that you're comfortable with, I believe Brad, has the plan to meet with each elected official, share the employee handbook with them in the hopes that they might be interested in adopting all or parts of it. Our HR department, coordinates with many of those elected officials, on many issues, and it's useful if we're all working off the same playbook. Many times I find that for elected officials, it's wonderful because it gives them a place to go to have a rule and an answer, and sometimes even a CYA. So I think it can be useful on both sides. It's not something we can require of an elected official. So, but that will be a process that will go forward after you have adopted the version that you think is appropriate. With that said, so throughout the book you will see references to department heads / other elected appointed officials. And the reason is if they do join in with us, we want to be clear that we're addressing how they would fit within this book. Now there are several sections that we believe are appropriately applicable to all, and that's something that Brad will be seeking consent and approval of all the elected officials on. And that's because they are things that deal with the use of county property, funded by you, insured by you, and that matter with respect to some of our insurance rates and how we handle those insurance policies. And those include the violence-free workplace, the workforce weapons policy, our IT systems policy, if they're using IT systems promulgated and paid for by the county, drug and alcohol-free workplace policy, the workplace safety policy, and the vehicular use policy. Those are all kind of categorically thought of as safety-based policies that are important that we would love to see everybody join in and enforce, just to keep insurance deductibles and premiums low, and also to ensure safety of the county workforce across all elected and your offices as well. The third component that I wanted to call to your attention is benefits. Lisa did address this in some respects with you when she previewed this at a previous meeting. You'll see some changes here that I think are a great asset to employees. One, you'll notice, I think, what I perceive as a commitment to annual evaluations in a bigger way, in terms of how those will be done and when. Merit increases are tied strictly to those annual evaluations. There's also a new soft benefit for employees that are going to be offering PTO, so time off, if there's no money available for salary increases. Because as you know, there's been times in government that there's lean years and there's no money to increase salaries for employees. They're still working hard, you still appreciate the work, it's a way for them to be rewarded. That's not a dollar for dollar exchange coming out of your budget. And in that respect, there's a chart that provides for if they get, say for instance, a 2% increase or 2% rating on their evaluation, then that equates to a certain number of days off that they get if that 2% raise is not available. Another benefit that's been put in this new policy that you may have questions about that is entirely new is something called paid family leave. I'm sure you've heard of the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. That is federal law, and that's mandatory for us, that we have to give 12 weeks of time off under certain serious health conditions. With respect to this new paid family leave, it provides an optional benefit that you could offer to your employees that is 4 weeks of paid leave at 60% of their salary. For bonding with a child at birth, adoption, or foster care. So it's limited to those child rearing actions. The paid family leave runs concurrently with FMLA. So that means they don't get to stack, 12 weeks of FMLA plus 4 more weeks of this PFL. But that's something that's now been added, and there's a specific section on it. So if you want to go right to that and read it, you should be able to find that easily in your table of contents. The fourth thing I wanted to call to your attention is just PTO in general. So now we're operating under a system where it's all personal time off, and it doesn't matter if it's sick or if you're on vacation. So previously we've had a bank of personal leave time for vacation and a separate bank for sick leave. And this is pretty common. I see a lot of employers doing this, and I think it's a good system because you give a certain amount of days off, and it really doesn't matter to you if they're homesick or if they're on vacation. It's just they're away, and you're allotting that many days to be away. So PTO is now combined. There is a benefit to the employees to the extent that the rollover of PTO hours has been increased to 480 hours per year. In addition, another, I think, enhancement of your PTO policy is that previously the accrual increases would stop at 10 years. So once you've been here 10 years, you wouldn't be able to accrue at any higher level. Under the new plan, the accrual enhancements continue up to a 25-year employee. And I remember Lisa, when she presented this, and I think maybe some of your direction going in, was to find ways to keep our good people here. And so that's what some of this is I think, geared towards. So, you know, the soft benefit in the PTO offerings here, as well as the paid family leave, as well as the potential PTO for salary increase in exchange for that. Those are all things that I consider to be additional soft benefits, with the idea of hoping increasing longevity of your employees. There's also an opportunity for a payout of 40 PTO hours once every calendar year. So while an employee could carry over hours, if they decide they wish to pay out, they can request one time a year that 40 hours get paid out. And that, I've seen that be very useful to employees if they have some kind of catastrophic, you know, issue in their home or medical or whatever. It's an opportunity, it's a pot of money they can call upon. Also, the accrual rate increases more quickly under this new PTO policy. So, you know, the accrual increases. It used to be, it would first, if you were a 0 to 2 year employee, it was at a certain rate, and then it would jump from there. Under the new policy, after you've been here a year, your accrual starts to build up more quickly. In terms of your PTO, you can earn more PTO per pay period, and then there's more steps in the escalation process. So I think that too is encouraging longevity with your employees. So under the old system, it was like a 0 to 2, and then a 2 to 5, and a 5 to 10, and here it's much more stair-stepped in terms of how they can accrue their time and build up more PTO as a benefit. The last item I would like to call to your attention as something I see as more of a substantive difference is the grievance policy, and I just want to touch on that briefly. You have had a grievance policy in your employee handbook in the past. However, that grievance policy had previously, left out the Human Resources Department, and I think it's important to have HR involved in this process. And I think we've clarified it as to the steps and what's required at each step, as well as some clarifications as what's required when you file your grievance to start with. It's important that if we're going to be able to address something, that we get a clear statement of what the problem is, rely upon what the policies are that they believe are in play, and give us a clear idea of what we're dealing with. The grievance policy in this new handbook, if it's just a regular employee, it would go from them to their direct supervisor with just an informal conversation. If that doesn't resolve it, then it escalates to step 2, which would go to the department head, or it would be an elected official if an elected official has joined in. If the department head does not resolve it at step 2 of the grievance process, then the step 3 would go to the Human Resources Department. So that's a new step in this process. The Human Resources Director then would have an opportunity to review the grievance, see what's been done below in the previous 2 steps, and determine if a meeting would be useful. Sometimes there's things that are black and white. You know, the HR director could look at it and realize that, you know, the employee may not be happy about it, but this is what the policy says, and this was applied fairly, and they can make a decision. But sometimes it's not that easy, and so the HR director would have the discretion to call a meeting. And also that meeting, and I'm not calling it a hearing because it's not a hearing, the employee would come and represent themselves, but have an opportunity to sit with the HR director, and could bring another employee or employees if they had other people they wanted to come in with them to share information. So it's an opportunity for that employee to fully vet their grievance before the HR director. And then the HR director would make a recommendation after having the opportunity to do all that fact finding. That recommendation goes to the county manager, and then the county manager's decision would be final, or the elected official in the case of any other elected office. So I think that's an enhanced grievance process that gives a little clarity, it adds some extra steps, and gives an opportunity to vet the grievance before the HR director, which I think would be a useful new step. So those are the primary things that I view as substantively added or changed. But would be happy to answer any questions if you have them, or certainly to entertain your questions between now and your next meeting if you want to review more closely and call or email me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions for legal. I had some processing questions. The fact that I like the idea of getting in front of our elected officials and ensuring they have enough time to to vet and give feedback from their perspectives. Ideally, they are part of the process because ideally they don't have to, but ideally they're following kind of uniformly with this vetted process. So, I would like to make sure that we do allow enough time, I guess, from this board
just to capitalize on that statement, Commissioner, myself and Mr. Gold have met with some of the constitutional officers already, sat down with them a week, actually beginning of the week, as we did when Lisa was here, to basically discuss their relationship with us.
Right.
I just wanted to let you know we had that, and we'll continue to do that.
And I guess, and I'm not sure this is the right forum to dive deep into this, but the impact and the function of the funding for some of these things. I realize that some of this is built-in static cost, and you're dealing with manpower cost, I guess, at that point, where you got the PTO extra day. I mean, you're still paying them if it's a salary situation. So it's just a matter of manpower cost because you don't have that person in that role or that job function for that additional time that they're away. So have we done any calculations on, from a financing standpoint, of what the impact is on that? And that's probably outside your
It
wheelhouse.
is, I would have to defer to either Vicki or Brad or Dave on that.
Yeah, if we can maybe get some additional, you don't have to answer it, I mean, I might have put you on the spot, but if we can get some additional feedback on that in the coming days, weeks.
We certainly can. I will bring to your attention, though, with the additional PTO hours that council talked about, that is a set hourly amount. By obviously going with a increase, that's a perpetual amount that continues to go, annually. So
Right.
it is at a cheaper cost to do, or lesser cost, I should say, by just one-time hourly cumulative. But we can certainly get that information for you.
Now, and just my final thing, and it's not a question, it's just a comment, the fact that I think that this is, for the benefit of the employees, hopefully this shows that we're taking a holistic approach to our whole idea on how we attract and retain employees, good employees. And not only are we looking at the salary study situation that's coming up, but this is a part of that, as well as the retirement package is part of that. So I commend those that are behind the scenes here, putting all these pieces together, that they're moving in the right direction.
Well, there hasn't been much incentive to stay.
Yeah.
And I think
To
that's
be
one of the
honest,
goals.
I mean,
with
you
some
get
of
to a
this.
point and buddy, that's it. I don't care if you stay 10 or 15 years more, you're not getting a thing for it. And that's not right.
Are we looking to move this to the next, are we gonna have one more work session or move it to the next voting session?
That's
Whatever the
certainly your
board's desire,
prerogative.
whatever your desire is there.
Once you believe you don't have changes, then I'll go back and, ensure that the table of contents matches pages and do those kind of, technical cleanups. But, I wanted to see if you had any major changes that would change pagination. So there'll be a little cleanup that I will do, but, just totally up to you. You'll certainly be ready at the next meeting if you wish.
Would it be prudent for us to move it to the next work session, and if we're ready at that work session after we have
Move
the
it that
further
night.
discussion,
Move
move
it
it
that
to
night.
that next voting session?
One other question, family leave. I know you said they had 12 weeks is by law, right? But they had an
Yes.
additional 4 weeks.
It
Can
would
you,
be additional. It would
Let's-
run together, so.
if something came up, say you had the 4 weeks for bonding, new child or adoption, and the illness came up later on that year, are you still eligible for the 12 weeks?
Well, that's a good question.
Because I don't want to see, if they use that 4 weeks, I don't want to see the 12 weeks go away if they've got an illness or child has an illness.
Well, I think the intention, and I'll look back at the language, and I would need to hear what your intention would be with that, because the paid family leave is a totally new concept that is a new financial obligation, so that's probably one you really want to see financial impact on. So it would be to your intention, so you don't even have to run it concurrently. I mean, you could say, we're gonna give people 4 weeks pay, 60% when they have birth of a child, and then we're gonna give them the 12 weeks unpaid. You could do that. It's currently drafted to be concurrent, which I think would indicate an intent that you could not get 4 plus 12. And I think typically if someone's had a baby, they're gonna take those 12 weeks instead of gonna run concurrently together. But I think to your point, someone could say, well, I'm gonna take 4 weeks paid, but I'm only gonna take 8 weeks at the birth of a child. And then I may wanna get 12 weeks when some
Or you don't know if
sickness
something comes
later.
up.
Right.
During the year or something,
Right.
or illness could come up.
Right, and that can happen really under any circumstance with Family Medical Leave Act, you know, it's on a rolling year, so if you happen to have more than one serious medical issue, that could be a problem.
I'd like to see it as a case by case, and they could present their case to HR, the county manager.
Well, that I would not recommend.
Okay.
Just simply because when there's discretion built into these types of things, particularly with respect to health and, you know, medical issues, I think it's just right for problems with the ADA and, you know, some other discriminatory laws that might be problematic. That's a very heartfelt response, but the lawyer's gonna say, I think it's better to have a black and white rule. So I think if you're concerned about it, I would suggest you could say you can stack them, if you want them to have that 12 weeks available at all times for a serious medical. But under the current circumstances, if a woman was having a child and she took 12 weeks, and then 2 months later, she has a catastrophic illness, or the child does, her 12 weeks are gone under that circumstance anyhow. So,
So
but
I
now,
don't know, we could take them to 4 weeks, and then the 12 weeks go away.
well, the 12 weeks wouldn't go away, but you'd be down at 4, you know. But now
So
with
you're talking
that
about
said-
12 total then, not 12 plus 4.
Exactly, 12 total is the way it's provided for, unless you say differently. You know, and the other thing is concurrent use of PTO. And all of this is with an eye towards ensuring that the employees get the 12 weeks allotted by law, but if they have all this PTO built up, they can't get 4 weeks of PTO plus 4 weeks of paid family leave plus 12 weeks of FMLA. It has to run concurrently. So the 12 weeks, if they are taking FMLA for 12 weeks, and they have maybe 3 weeks of paid leave that's built up, then their first 3 weeks of FMLA would be paid, and so that would be exhausted, and then they would go forward unpaid. And that's how most employers will run it in terms of concurrent leaves and not stacking, because otherwise you can end up with an employee out for 4 or so months, or more, and that can be a real hardship. Now, you know, in the circumstances that you mentioned, Commissioner Satterfield, if there's a situation where the leave was taken, even if it was just standard FMLA 12 weeks and then some other illness comes up, there could be other opportunities under our leave of absence policy that someone could take off leave unpaid, or through the ADA sometimes there's a reasonable accommodation by law that could mean some time off for treatment or something like that. So while I gave what may sound like a heartless response to your heartfelt suggestion, there are opportunities under the law to accommodate those kinds of things through either reasonable accommodation or other leave. But y'all would just need to let us know that.
It's impossible to cover every scenario. And there is, I mean, unfortunately, you have to look, everything comes down to money. You have to look at it.
And get the job done, because many
Yeah.
times the vacant spot can be very harmful in an organization. But I would just ask y'all to let us know that. I mean, do you want them to stack? Do you want them to be concurrent? Do you want to carve out the PFL and give them those 4 weeks on top of their 12? I mean, those are all policy issues that may be, you know, really directed by how you get the financial impact on these once you get that information.
Angie, what have you seen in other counties?
You know, typically I'll see concurrent leave and not stacked, just to protect the organization, so you know that an individual employee is never going to be out really more than 12 weeks unless there's something that pushes it out further through the Americans with Disabilities Act or something else. So that's very common. This paid family leave is something that I don't see a lot. I mean, I think that's a great benefit. Not everybody offers that, and this would be new to this county as well, to offer that paid 60% leave.
I guess we do offer short-term disability as
Yes.
an option for people to take
Exactly.
advantage of if they have those considerations.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you for your attention.
And on new business, we got the presentation of the salary study, benefit advisor group, President Dr. Long. You can do that presentation.
Which way do I point this when I want to change? Anywhere?
Either one.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate it. My name is Donald Long. I'm with the Company Management Advisory Group International, former name. And over the last few months, we've had the pleasure of working with the departments, department heads, and employees in the review of salary levels and classification and compensation is the formal name of this type of study. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview of the process and a little bit of preliminary information so that I know you're not going to take action today. And what we'd like to do is just give you a sense of what the possible costs would be. There are a number of different ways that a study can be implemented, and we'll discuss that, and I'll give you an overview of that as we go. First, in terms of the objectives, study goals and objectives, it's a compensation classification study. One of the things we were asked to do was to look at your relationship to the market. I'll give you some more detail about that, and that included a survey of other agencies in the area. In terms of classification, we want to make sure that people that are performing similar kinds of work are going to be classified and leveled and put at the same and appropriate level. So we looked at the job responsibilities and the complexity of the jobs and the knowledge required, education experience for all the jobs. We want to make sure that the internal relationships are correct relative to one another within the overall pay structure. We have made and are going to be making some more what we call policy recommendations, best practices. Some of that might overlap with what you just heard, and that's fine. We like to offer our ideas and what we see out there because we do this on a regular basis. The kind of best practices that are used in administering and handling a compensation program. So that will be in your report as well. In terms of the scope of this project, it included 332 positions and about 137 job titles. So that is the entire scope of it, study goals and objectives. Real briefly, I could talk a long time, but won't, on the methodology. We initially captured some what we call key employee data, the names and salary levels currently and so forth, a lot of related information that HR was very helpful in providing. We conducted employee sessions that we call orientation sessions that employees attended, and we explained what the study was all about, what their role would be in the process, and that role primarily had to do with completing job questionnaires. And they did that through our website. It's an online job questionnaire, about 25 pages, and if there are any employees here, they would remember that. So it was quite comprehensive, and of the 332 employees that were included in the scope, we had over 300 employees completing that questionnaire. So I'm very, very proud of employees in that respect. They did a great job. They provided us comprehensive information, and your previous HR director was very instrumental in making sure that they did their job in terms of
How
completing
many did you
questionnaires.
say responded?
I'm sorry?
How many did you say responded?
Over 300. It was about a 95, 96%.
Wow.
So all of the job titles were represented in the completion of the questionnaires. So that was our first goal. The second goal was to have everybody have the opportunity. But sometimes there were positions where there were many people in the position, and maybe there were shifts. So I know the deputy sheriff position was included. So, but I was very pleased with the overall participation. They did great. I talked to department heads and talked about any recruitment and the retention problems that they had, identified particular positions where there might be issues at stake. One of the primary parts of the study had to do with doing a survey, and I'll go into more detail on that later. That's the overall part of the process. We reviewed all the job questionnaires that everybody completed. We looked and changed a few of the job titles to make sure that the job titles reflect the work actually being done. And again, overall, was to make sure that there was a good balance between the internal relationships, how positions fit relative to one another, and the external relationship, how you fit relative to the market. And I'm going to show you some possible implementation costs. There are a number of different ways to do implementation, and I'll talk to you about that in just a couple of slides. In terms of the overall, just a picture in terms of how the process unfolds, I talked about the balance between what we call internal equity and external equity. Internal equity, how the positions relate to one another in terms of their overall responsibility and education experience, and all those factors come into play. And the external equity, how you fit relative to the outside market. And then, of course, we develop schedules and any possible adjustments and calculations and so forth. In terms of the overall survey, we actually surveyed, I think, 67 positions within your 137 positions. So about half. It was pretty good, substantial amount of review of market. And we looked at all of these different agencies. Of course, some of them are to the south of you, some to the north. So we wanted to get a balance of, a variety of different employers. And we had excellent response from all of these. I just saw a typo, so let's not worry about that. So anyway, all those agencies were requested, and pretty much all of them responded. Not all of them had every position that was surveyed, but we got such a substantial response. I'm pretty confident in the outcome and the response. So what I want to do is talk to you about what we call your relationship to the overall market. Again, some positions were really behind, what we call lagging. Some positions were competitive and A-okay, and other positions might have been a little bit ahead, but they were hard to find. So most of the positions were lagging this market that I just described for you. So what we do is we roll up all of the information, and overall, compared to all the positions that were reviewed and surveyed for all those different market targets, we call them, comparison to the minimums who were almost 10% behind, compared to your midpoints, again, almost 10% behind, and your maximums were 7.43% over. And this is overall. Again, some positions a little bit less, some positions a lot more. So this is an overall roll-up of all the calculations, the numbers of the surveyed positions. And I identified just a few positions that really stood out, that were at least 10% and as much as 20% behind at the minimums as well as the maximums. And some of those, again, stood out, so I wanted to just point them out so you have them presented. So in terms of the recommendations overall we're going to be providing is what we call a unified plan for all positions. There are some agencies that have a public safety plan, an executive plan, general employee plan. What we like to do is provide a unified plan so you can see how the positions relate to one another from the beginning of the structure to the very top of the structure. We're suggesting open ranges. That's normally where agencies are going these days rather than step plans. The market told us that the width of the ranges should be at 55%, so we try to reflect the market, what we discover in the market, and overall we found about 55% from minimum to the maximum. So the structure is set like that, 5% between the grades as you go up the structure. So what our goal is to make sure you're in a competitive position, that the entry levels are competitive, and that the overall ranges are in line with the market. So in terms of implementation approaches, again, there are different methods and approaches that could be done. We're targeting and have set calculations at January 1st. Of the 332 employees in the study, a little over a third are below the recommended, the average market minimum. Okay. To me, that's relatively significant. I usually don't find quite that percentage of employees that would need to be adjusted to the minimum of the recommended ranges. So that tells me you're behind. In addition, so normally the first step in an implementation is to make sure that you have all the employees brought at least to the minimum of the recommended and implemented pay range. So, but in addition, we offer a suggested approach that does what we call equity adjustments, that recognizes time in the position so that you don't have the compression that can get created from bringing all those good people to the minimum of the ranges. And it also recognizes the time that people have put in. And it does very precise calculations to accomplish that. And it's based on, and what we've been given is promotion dates, so that for every person in the scope of the study, they will have a calculated target amount. And that amount, first of all, first action step is to go to the minimum, and then an equity adjustment that recognizes time in the position that creates separation. So if you have a 10-year employee and a 2-year employee, the recognition of the time in the same position, you'll advance the 10-year person. So there's that separation and recognition. Otherwise, it could be all cramped up, compressed, if you will. So the calculations are done. So if that would add another couple hundred people to the equity adjustments. So in terms of the cost, which is where we're going here, we are able to show you what the cost would be, first of all, of what we call 100%. We label it 100%, and that is 100% of the market, and that is the overall average. Okay, overall average of the market for all those agencies that I noted and showed you. We've done an overall average and put together a plan, and so at the overall average of the market, the costs would be, in order to adjust the 100 and some people to the minimum on an annualized basis, would be $283,000. The equity adjustments that I just discussed to advance those people based on their promotion dates would be $633,000 annualized cost. Adding those two numbers would be $917,000. So the overall cost to bring 211 people to minimum, as well as the equity adjustments at the overall average of the market, would be the $917,000 annualized. And that's 6.87% of the overall payroll that's within the scope of the study. Now, 6.87% is, for the amount that you're behind or lagging the market, is not, in our world, look at this on a regular basis, is not bad, is not excessive. It's moderate, modest to get to adjustments, to make adjustments for getting to the minimum as well as the equity adjustments. So in terms of percentage overall of the payroll within the scope of the study, the 6.87% would bring everyone and all of the pay ranges to the overall average of the market, the 100% level. So we said, okay, let's look at it a little bit further, and I can show you another approach that would actually raise the water level a little bit to be even a little bit more competitive with the overall market. Okay, so the 100% of the market average that you're seeing there takes into account both your competitive market on the north side and the west and the south. If we raise that water level a little bit to, for example, 105% of the market average, and some agencies do this. Some agencies do this. There's nothing wrong with this at all. This puts you in a more competitive position. The cost is a little bit greater. To the minimum, so it's $539,000 annualized. The equity adjustments would be $895,000. The overall cost to implement where we are right now is the 1.4 million, and 269 people will be adjusted to allow for adjustment to the minimum as well as to the equity, adjustments. And the overall change in total payroll for the included positions in the study, it would be 10.75% of the payroll. So this is another way to look at it. We do this for some agencies. I have worked with many over the years, and there are some that want to be really very competitive at the average, others want to be a little bit more. I think this 105% would put you in a better position relative to your neighbors to the south. But we took this one more step, and there are some agencies that do this at 110% of the overall market average would be a slightly higher cost. To the minimum would be $917,000 annualized, $1.1 million for equity adjustments, for a total of $2 million. 304 people up to 332 would receive adjustments under this approach, and the total payroll change would be about 15%. So you can see how when you raise that, I call it raising that water level, raising the structure, in fact is what that does, it can result in additional costs. So it's a matter of compensation philosophy. I think that overall, 100% would put you at an overall, to the overall market, including the north, west, and south markets. 105% would put you in a better competitive position relative to your neighbors to the south. And 110% would put you in a very competitive position relative to the overall market and to your neighbors to the south. So, in terms of, I mentioned policies, we will make recommendations in terms of best practices for how you reclassify a position, what do you do when you get a reclassification request, promotion, how to handle, lateral transfer, promotion, temporary assignments, hiring, and so forth. Additionally, addressing employees who quote-unquote max out. In the software that we use for the purpose of making these calculations, it doesn't calculate anyone above the recommended maximum of that pay range. It doesn't do it. And if you adopt pay ranges, you should do it. So in terms of transition, typically what my agencies will do is you look at the overall classification structure and plan, adopt the levels and the assignments of the individuals to the positions, which we are doing and recommending, adopt the structure and the ranges, look at the personnel policies, which are doing very comprehensively, and I must add, I'm very impressed with that. And then implement the new structure and equity adjustments as you can. So I've tried to put a lot into it, hopefully, but it's been a short time. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Dr. Long?
I'm usually first, so I'm gonna see what else before I do. Is there any consideration put into the comparison of our benefits package to our neighbors around us as far as the health insurance package that we offer in consideration to, or comparison to our other?
Well, we weren't asked to look at those particular aspects and those benefits, but certainly it's always good to have a proper balance.
Yeah. I mean, from the feedback that I think we got from Lisa was that we are trending on the higher end from a performance standpoint. When we look at comparisons for plans with our neighbors, we do very well on benefits. I mean, it's a very, very good benefit package. My second question was, did we have any consideration into the timing of our surrounding counties? Have they been doing the same process that we're doing today? Or did they just get off the tail end of this, or have they been at that for a period of time and they're about to do it again? Was there any feedback provided from them of that?
It varies all over. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very, some yes, some no, some wait. And normally it's every, 4 or 5 years that this kind of thing is done from the outside.
Okay.
Moving target.
And then my final question is if we were to implement it, in your professional opinion, in order to stay in a competitive position moving forward beyond this particular hurdle, I think historically in the last couple of years, we've been doing it at about a 2% clip. Is that what we need to anticipate moving forward in order to stay in the position so we don't get behind the 8 ball like we are today?
That's a great question. Typically what we do is look at what we call the economic cost index.
Mhm.
And when we get asked the question as to how much, and perhaps across the board might be given, we rely on that. In terms of actually the structure, what we would typically do is suggest that we move the structure slightly, but not at the same amount if you're going to do any kind of adjustment across the board. Because then all you're doing, you just keep people right at the same position within the structure. Yeah, but if you move it just a little bit, even half, if you give it 2%, move the structure to 1%, and then you're not faced with big adjustments when you do the more comprehensive review. Move it a little bit, but not as much as you might do if you're going to do an overall individual adjustment.
The 100%, you said it would bring our employees to the minimum of the market. Is that out of all the departments or counties you surveyed? Is it a minimum to? Okay.
Yes, almost 10% overall for all the 67 or 68 positions that we surveyed. Overall, you're almost 10% behind at the minimum.
So we'd still be 10% behind at the minimum if you did the 100%.
No.
Oh.
No, at the 100%, you'd be at the average of the market.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the minimum and the range?
When he says a minimum, that's what I was looking at. It says 119 employees would be 211 employees. That would affect 211 employees, but that would be the minimum mark.
I think that, okay, we get our terms right.
Yeah.
That is
Or
the,
go-
that is
Uh,
the.
That's what he said, a minimum.
Yeah, 119 people would be brought to the minimum, and that's to the 100% marker that I
Right.
mentioned. Yeah. It would, if you did 105% of the market for the structure, it would probably be, I can find out and run it, but it would be a few more people that would be.
You had, I think you went to
269.
269.
Well, overall, yeah, that includes both being brought to the minimum of the range and equity adjustment.
And equity adjustment.
It would be 269.
What has been, and it probably varies throughout the number of organizations you work for, but the implementation plan, I know our neighbors in Cherokee, I believe it is, they implemented their process over a 24-month span, so they, and I'm not sure whether they chose 110, 105, or 100, but basically cut that thing in half and say, all right, year one, we're doing X, 50% of that to get them up to that point, and then the next year they're doing that. I would assume the next year you still have to add your 1% in order to still be on, keep on.
Or you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Okay.
And if you wanted to do it, and there are some agencies that we work with that do that, rather than chopping it all off at the same time, for example. If you do it over 2 years, let's say if we look at the 105%, this is an example. If you want to do it over 2 years, at this level of the structure,
Right.
it would be the $539,000 overall to the minimums. And that would be effectively about half of that 895 that's showing there. So the total on that would be whatever it would be. That's about 1 million.
Well, you said the next year, like Chris's question, next year you'd want to put that that 1%, 2%, whatever the market's showing,
Yeah.
the economy's showing, you would need to add that back up or
No,
we'd
so
start
you're
getting
not
behind
getting
again.
behind again.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't take those numbers and divide it by 2?
Only the number of the 895 equity adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah.
You bring everybody to minimums regardless.
I would suggest that.
Yeah, and then that your first year, you bring, at a minimum, you bring everybody to minimum. And then, I mean, I haven't crunched the numbers yet to see if it's
Well, I can tell you
palatable
exactly
it
what
is,
it's
but,
gonna do,
but,
the calculated number be, but that's just kind of an estimate there.
Yeah.
So it would be the 539 plus.
Half of the
that
895, right.
Which is about $1 million.
yeah,
For the first year,
yeah, if you do a 2-year
if you do a
spread,
2-year program.
then that's at the 105, and I think your second year function is slightly higher in order to keep up with the trend line, I think you would see the problem. So you've brought us everything but a check.
No, I didn't. I was gonna say you had a money machine with you.
It's in the mail, so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would say, from the feedback I heard, the way that the approach that y'all took was very transparent, and it took into consideration, I think the feedback from the employees was very good, so appreciate y'all for that.
Thank you.
Next is presentation request for impact fees for library material.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm Leslie Clark, Library Director for Chesapeake Regional Center in Dawson and Washington County. And first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to request this, but also to thank you for honoring part of some of our budget requests for this past year of increasing the library funding. And it came to our attention at one of the budget meetings that there is impact fee money for the library for materials. And we would, I respectfully request access to some of that, particularly half for the upcoming year to enhance some library materials. We're having a struggle maintaining demand for bestsellers and the new materials. And now that the plan is with some of the funding that you did give us is to expand the hours of satellite library, which also increases the demand for the new materials. We do that. In addition to trying to meet the demand for new materials, we also, in times past when economics were not quite so good, we bought a lot of materials, particularly for children, in paperback form, and those have worn out. And we need to replace them. Several different collections and things that are beloved by children, and some books for adults as well, in the library binding. And that, of course, is a cost that's greater than, of course, a paperback book. So I'm just respectfully requesting access to the impact fees designated for the library for materials.
Do you have that total?
That's what
I
I'm
don't
saying.
have that
Well, the total
total.
that I was given in the paperwork for 2019 was $38,934.07.
8,900.
30, yes, I think that's what it was. The next column over was 38,735.
Okay.
8,930 or 38,000?
I'm sorry,
I thought you said
38,735 and 51 cents.
That's the total.
That's the total, yes ma'am, that was allocated for 2019.
But you're only requesting 8,000.
I'm requesting half.
Oh, okay.
What's the 8,900?
I don't know where the 8,000 came from. Maybe I just misspoke and tripped over my tongue. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
I'm requesting half of that.
Yes.
That's-
I mean, if you'd like to give us all of it, we'd be happy to take it, but we're not trying to, we have new staff too. We don't want to exceed. We just want to try to get up to where we need to be and then make the request again next year. We get that also.
Vicki, how does she access this? How does this work?
Well,
She's doing the process right now. She's coming before you all to ask for the funding.
That's her money, I don't see why, you know, if it's allocated for libraries, I don't see why she can't use it.
Typically because it's a capital projects fund, it's usually not budgeted at the beginning of each year. So that's pretty much the standard way. Unless you all decide you want to budget for it each year, I would recommend that they come before you and ask for that funding.
Tell me again the figure that you're asking for.
I'm asking for half of the $38,000 or $19,000.
Okay, I don't know where we got the 8,000.
I don't know either. Perhaps
She made a little mistake.
Oh, it's probably these ears.
Yeah, I'm sure it's me.
No, I got it. I was in two down
Hey.
there.
So, my apologies.
Well,
Thank you.
normally people ask for more.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
Any other questions?
The money's already there.
Yes.
It's already,
Yes.
this is not projecting.
No,
How
just
much.
the money. The money's in there.
And it continues to grow with on the residential side. That's a big function of that.
I love impact fees. I just love them.
Yes, ma'am, we do too. When we found out they were there, we were like, well, we like that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next is a presentation request to accept a Georgia Emergency Management Grant, Homeland Security K-9 Grant Award. Chief Thompson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So what we have before you is the acceptance. We were notified about 2.5 weeks ago that the grant that was applied for $14,000 for K-9 support from GEMA Homeland Security. We were approved. So this is a formality to come before you all tonight within the work session and hopefully at the later voting session to just ratify the approval of this grant. I'll take any questions that you all may have for the K-9 grants.
Any questions for the chief?
How many dollars have you got?
Right now, 3.
3.
And I know that the sheriff's here, he might be able to answer. They got some dollars as well, I think, in their
Correct.
program. Is there any efficiencies of operations with both of those outfits?
Separate.
I know they're separate
His are
grants.
typically apprehension, drug, narcotics, where ours are either live search or
Search.
kidnapping. Correct.
But we don't get bulk contracts for food or anything like that.
No, sir. And then this one, we eliminated the food process of it. So it's specific to equipment, exercise drills, and training. For the fund.
So we have to, you're requesting that we accept $14,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Tonight, it's preferred.
Oh, we need to move
I don't know
that.
why we don't just grab it.
Yeah, and so I do apologize on behalf of GEMA. If you remember, probably about a month and a half ago, I came before you all for the GEMA grants portal. They swapped over to an online version. And this kind of came out right in the middle of that. The problem was just we didn't quite have access to it yet. So we knew it was, I think the county manager got pinged an email, hey, you've been awarded this. The problem was I wasn't able to go inside and access it because we hadn't executed the MOU just quite yet. And I had to get my access to be able to bring it before you.
Do we have that paperwork to sign tonight if it's approved?
Did you include it in the packet? I don't recall.
It's just a formality of, it's in the packet, but yeah, it can be, because I have to print it from the online portal.
No,
now.
we can just-
I don't see it in my packet.
Okay, cool.
Oh, we could run it for it.
Yeah, because I mean, Billy's not here to sign it, but if there's nothing to sign, I mean, we can move it and just ratify it. Ratify it and leave it second.
Yeah,
So
no,
we need to move that to tonight,
Yep.
just to ratify it. Any other questions?
Yeah, you would just actually, I think, just make a motion to receive the funds, and that would be adequate.
So we can add that to tonight, 6 o'clock, okay. Any other questions? Chief Thompson, you got the next one. Presentation request, Georgia Trauma Commission EMS trauma related grant for equipment.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. again, as you're all very aware, January 2010, state of Georgia enacted the super speeder law. A portion of those funds benefit various organizations, the trauma hospitals, and also EMS agencies. Specifically for us here, we were awarded $726.15 per med unit, which comes to a total of $3,630.75. And what we are requesting, and because we do have to submit this to the Office of EMS for your next meeting. So again, we would ask that you move it, vote to approve these funds. There's no matching dollars whatsoever. It's basically a reimbursement. We'll spend the $3,600 and some change there on the approved equipment list sent out by the Georgia Trauma Commission, and then we'll get it reimbursed. I'll answer any questions.
That's equipment that's normally purchased through general fund, so it's a reduction in general fund demand.
It just helps us, that's correct.
Any other questions, Chief?
Why would anybody not accept funds? Tell me.
I'm gonna plead the fifth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, ding, ding, ding. I hope.
Right, Chief, your show again. Next one's presentation request to apply for Georgia Forestry Commission Volunteer Assistance. It's a 50/50 grant, right, Chief?
That's correct. Georgia Forestry Commission every year sends out the 50/50 grant. It's a maximum of $10,000. So basically there would be a $5,000 match. This would not actually occur until the grant is awarded. This has given us the approval to apply. However, the grant period closes December 1st before your next board commission meeting. So unfortunately, I need to get your blessing to go ahead and apply for this. It's not saying that we will get it. We have received this grant for the last 3 years in a row. We anticipate that we'll be able to receive it again, but it's really just a permission to go after it since it's a 50/50 grant. And I will answer any questions.
So the 50% come out of your budget
That's correct, but it won't be till
next
after.
year,
Yes.
and you've already budgeted possibly for that. Yeah. Any other questions? Need to move that one to tonight also?
Unfortunately, yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's the way the state works sometimes, you get it at the last minute. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up's Donald with the FY 2021 Georgia Department of Transportation Federal Transit.
Good afternoon, Chairman Satterfield and commissioners. The first thing I have to bring before you today is our request for FY 2021 GDOT FTA Section 5311, our transit contract approval. This is the grant that we bring before you every year on transit. It's a 50/50 match. It's a no-win situation where we transport our senior clients as well as those under age 60. Our senior rides, of course, are free rides, and we get reimbursed usually around $50,000 to $60,000 a year from DHS for those rides. So it sort of balances out, and plus we get the paid rides for those under 60 that we transport. And it's a document that we have to prepare every year for FTA and GDOT with census data in it and our rides and how much we charge. And the document was included in your packet. If you have any questions about that. And this is something that has to be turned in by the 6th, so I'm asking, sorry, everything on the agenda probably is to ratify this tonight, because it has to, like I said, it has to be turned in by the 6th, I believe, and we had to run something in the paper for it
I know it.
to meet that.
Are there any significant changes?
No, ma'am. You know, we did not put any extra funding in there for an increase in salaries, which we may have down the road, which that may be something the county would have to pay a little bit of portion. But no, we're not getting a new bus. This is 2021, we're not getting a new bus. No changes really whatsoever, minimum in FICA or anything like that, and no change in office supplies or same thing that we've had in the past.
Any other questions? John, you're up again for the FY 2020 Legacy Link
So
contract.
are you in agreement we can ratify
Yes,
this
yes,
tonight?
yes.
Okay,
Yes, we will
Okay.
move.
okay. The,
And then the two, that's, usually you have more than that during a year.
we do, but now we're on a different calendar, we're not on a calendar year, so this is, November, and we're on addendum 2 from July 1st. So the first addendum that we received back, I came before you a couple of months ago, was a pretty good increase. So now we have another, and this is a decrease of just $1,041, but usually we get money in the springtime, but this is with Legacy Link, and usually 2 to 3 addendums per year, so we've got 7 more months in the contract, so we would like to get this ratified.
Tonight,
Oh,
I
Just
guess
to
the
get
question for the county attorney, can we just put them all?
Yeah, I mean, we can add each of these
Yeah.
to the new
Make
business.
one motion to ratify all of them?
I would do
At
them
once.
individually, yeah. Oh, do you mean,
instead of taking them one at a time, he just wants to.
oh, well, I think we should keep them in the description.
That would be a no, I say.
I'll try it.
But this is a very minimum decrease, and like I said, the amendment 1 was a good increase. And still, we might not be out this money at all, it just depends on how much money, how many meals we serve. So this is not saying we're gonna be out $1,001, it's just, that's less that's available for us.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you.
County manager report.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Good afternoon. You got your key indicator reports for the month of October, as well as the list of agreements and contracts signed over the past month. They're all in your packet. We will host our employee Thanksgiving luncheon tomorrow at Veterans Memorial Park. I hope you will join us in serving there. That has become a nice annual event that I think our employees really look forward to. And speaking of Thanksgiving, I'd also like to remind everyone that county offices will be closed next Thursday and Friday, November the 28th and 29th for the holiday. I also have a few human resource related notes to mention. Our ACCG marketing and field services representative will be here tomorrow to present a $5,000 check to Human Resources, Christy Ruttman, for the safety grant, which was used for the purchase of safety equipment for public works and emergency services. I assume we'll accept that check. Additionally, Christy.
We have to vote on that tonight.
Additionally, Christy recently attended the Georgia Local Government Personnel Association Fall Conference, where she completed course training in employee rewards, total compensation, and the legal environment of human resources management. These classes are part of the Certified Human Resource Manager Program curriculum, and Christy is expected to complete the 5-year course of study next fall. So congratulations to her. I'm also pleased to announce that Human Resources, Erica Del Mico, is in her last few weeks of her Human Resource Management Certification program. This program is offered through the University of North Georgia Division of Professional and Continuing Education. It consists of 12 3-hour sessions every Thursday evening. So we congratulate her as well. And finally, as you may have read in the paper, Emergency Services recently accepted a check for $4,000. This is from the Amicalola EMC. The department was presented the check in October, and the donations has been placed in the fire department's donation account. That concludes my report.
Any questions? County attorney?
I do not have any public report, but I do have one item for executive session.
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session for
Threatened litigation.
threatened litigation.
Have a motion and a second. Vote. With that, we're adjourned and we're going to executive session. There'll be no vote needed to come out.